Hi, this is Henry Chamberlain. I have Dash Shaw, and this is a major treat for me. It is for all you fans out there and folks who are new to Dash Shaw. Well, stay tuned. I want to just say a quick intro. Dash Shaw is known for Bottomless Belly Button. That's a graphic novel. It's monumental, iconic at this point. He's also known for many other works. So that's what's going to be interesting because there's so many works of his and animated features. My entire high school is sinking into the sea. Cryptozoo. Uh, First, thank you, Dash, for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
And I want to show the book, of course, Blurry. And
With
I,
with uh with
yeah,
notes stuck in. Oh boy.
well, it looks more impressive than it need be. I wanted to say that the book is such a work that you could almost turn to any page and have something interesting to say. And I turned to some that I thought, hey, this could spark a little give and take here and there. So we'll show some of the pages, and it helps being prepared as much as possible. I have notes and all that stuff. I can also show I do have a few of your books, Discipline,
Cool.
and
Thanks.
folks will. Well, and I do this as like a visual aid. Discipline, New School, very different books from coming from very different places, and yet we can chat about that a bit. They're all part of a bigger process because it's interesting. You truly are an artist who happens to work in a comics medium, and so it's all a big process. But let me turn over to, and I might need to edit as I'm making my way over to the book to show some pages, or maybe it'll be there. That's a
Oh,
seamless enough segue. So while I'm setting this up, Dash, if you wanted to give like a an elevator pitch or a quick intro for people who are completely new to Blurry, what is Blurry about in a nutshell to start?
a guy gets a text. His brother's getting married, and he's been invited to be at the wedding, and he needs to get a dress shirt for the wedding that matches the other groomsmen. So he goes to a store and he has to choose between two very similar dress shirts, and he can't decide. And the woman at the store tells a story about choosing between similar glasses, or and it goes into her story, and then it goes into someone else who is undecided about a small thing. After that, it keeps going deeper and deeper in, and then the latter half of the book is it all rippling out of these people, um, kind of coming out of their indecision or their doubt. Um, so and it has no chapter breaks. It kind of feels like one long trip. That was the idea, that it's kind of like one long zoom in and then zoom out, or dive in and then dive out, however you want to say it. Dive into people, and ideally, what's it's surprising how far you can go into a um, a decision that is pretty pointless or near pointless, uh, and then how kind of enjoyable it can be to see it all ripple out. That's how I had a hard time. The elevator pitch on the book, maybe it's obvious I'm still kind of struggling with, but um, and it kind of got harder. I mean, it was hard when I was working on it because I had vague ideas, and it kind of I had an idea, but I didn't know what kind of words to use to articulate it. I had a feeling of a kind of zone where it would be sort of nothing too dramatic happens, but and nothing is too funny, or nothing is too like it. It's sort of like a weird. The book is a zone, And ideally, if you tap into the zone, there's something enjoyable about hanging out with these people.
Yeah, there's no one narrator guiding the whole narrative. And as an exercise for myself, I wrote down all the characters' names just to try to ground myself, or to remember, because I've been researching all sorts of different things. But the book is just to get everyone uh, on the same page. The book is a delight. You just dive into it like a novel. And I was thinking, is there a term when you have disparate characters coming from different places? They don't really know each other, and then there's a through line that develops. And I don't know if there really is a term. A lot of fiction is that way. Um,
Yeah,
but
it's funny that, like I said, when I was working on it, it was a little more amorphous, and like I didn't know if I I didn't know if I should put character guides. Like what's on screen right now is the end pages of the book, which are the character guides. Because without the character guides, it had this feeling which I kind of liked, where you're like, this book could dive into any character at any point, and they would have some whole other thing going on.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think the book still kind of has that feeling, even with the character guides, because ideally there's sort of enough characters where you kind of get lost in it, and then you're reminded in the second half. Because I felt like if it had one less level, then you could keep track of it, and one more would be too hard. So I kind of settled in this space where I thought, it was enough to have that feeling of it could dive into anyone at any point, while also being legible, readable, not a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I can see where, not that you're going to be doing this, but you could do a series of books like this, and it would be like just an endless fun project, connecting lives together and finding, well, what is the big picture that connects them all? And part of it is indecision. And people are at pivotal moments in their lives. They're struggling to try to figure out the meaning of their life, their purpose in life. And so each character, you immerse yourself into their struggle. As there's Kay, he's right now as a life model, but not so sure he wants to continue doing that. And then right intersecting with him is the professor, who he has his own baggage. Uh, and there's all these little nuggets that these are, as you get deeper into the weeds, you can add these additional little things like this. There's just this moment of levity where this student is triggered by Pablo Picasso, and like the professor's not exactly buying it, or he's that's a little too much for him, and it just
I
goes
feel
on.
like he's not sure how much he cares.
Yeah, yes, which I respond with a laugh, but someone else may not, and you don't know, you can't control your reader. You don't know how they're going to respond or interpret things.
But
But
when you say you're not sure how they're connected, I feel like that's uh, I'm sure some people might bristle at that, but I felt if it was something where it felt like they all had one real logical through line, it would be less interesting. That ideally, it's sort of, like I said, surprising that these people can weave through each other.
yeah,
Um, and then also, like, if there was one lesson that they all learned, then it would seem lame to me. I feel like what is enjoyable is that the people hear the other people's stories, but they respond differently to it. So they'll, meaning, um, someone would give advice to another character, but they might not take that advice. They'll be like, well, on the way to trying to solve this problem, I found this other thing, and that then led to this other thing, which I feel like is how life works. That it's rarely like a one-to-one solution to these things.
oh, I agree. I sometimes might uh, come across as glib, or I sometimes will be sarcastic. But I'm listening carefully, and what I say isn't necessarily always what I'm thinking, and then I'll catch myself and have to restate something. Um, but there's just so many gems, and so I'm right now I'm just thinking about the form here, and the form repeats here, and I don't know if that's something I imagine that's something that you can't help but be aware of, or is it when you're drawing something sometimes it's subconscious, and or when you're planning a page, were you thinking about have the form here, and eventually maybe I'll repeat it here?
Do you just mean that someone is lying, and that that's a quasi famous sculpture of the rabbit that leaping like that? You just mean that there's a shape at that particular
Yeah,
um
I'm kind of inviting you to dissect a page, because that's always like a staple in interviews, or at least for me. I invite you to dive in, and if this page isn't necessarily the most arresting, we could try something else or not. Is
well, I mean the um this book was made in kind of an I did it what sometimes people call the Chester Brown style, where I drew the panels separately.
mm-hmm.
And so that way I was really only thinking about what was happening in the panels, not the page. I mean, sometimes your rules adjust a little bit, and that was so that I could extend scenes or shorten scenes and be really just 100% focused on the characters and what's happening. Um, so for example, like on that page, maybe I had a version where I didn't think I needed the panel of the taxi cab to get to the museum, but then I realized I needed that panel, and so I drew it and inserted it in, um, and it's kind of finding the rhythm of the whole thing. I've done other books where especially the book New School, where I was very like trying to draw connections between things on the page, whether it be the color and the line art or different panels kind of interacting with each other and not just the normal reading way.
Yes.
Um, but I don't, the other thing that, how much of it is me thinking and how much of it is just is the kinds of things that I draw and what I draw like. And I don't have a I'm I'm not I have my range and my interest that I can't change even if I wanted to, and I can change the tools that I use and the scale that I draw, but I think obviously if you look at all the panels, whatever my sense of composition is, or the bodies and it's lots of like figure drawing obviously,
Yes.
but uh I don't it's less doesn't feel maybe as intellectual as it seems, meaning it's pretty intuitive.
Well, that's perfect. I just wanted like a little taste of that. And I really love these two pages. Well, I focused on this panel. I just thought it was, for me, it was just very funny. Um, and well, I don't know if I should say this, but maybe this will be interesting. This character with the bun for a hairdo, a different character appears in body work. And also, I noticed as I was going through some of your other works that some of the characters in I think doctors, one looks like the professor, and one looks like mala. Is that intentional, or is that just? I would think it'd be a kind of a delicious thing to do to bring those types back into some other different, completely different work.
No, I think I've like figured out at some point that I draw like the same
That's
three
just your
people,
way. Yeah.
and it's like one's my mom, one's my dad, and the other's my brother, and like one's my friend, and then I just remix those features into weird combinations, like a like a card game, you
No,
know.
that's
So,
perfect. That's perfect.
but the yeah, and I mean, and I especially, I'm a lot of times I I will use photo reference, but not for like someone didn't pose for all, I don't. So it's it's what I have access to in my limited um, um, toolkit in my brain. Um, but there are a lot of variations in there, and the funny hairstyle I feel like is kind of a comics code. But with this book, I spent a lot of I wanted it to be clear what the F was happening in every panel, and so that led to some kind of decisions that are quite quote unquote cartoony, like that hairstyle where
Hmm.
she isn't going to be you're not going to confuse her with another character in the book.
Hmm.
I don't like Mala. She's the only one with that particular hairstyle. Like I kind of hairstyle coded like you know Sailor Moon or something to keep track of everybody.
Um, is there something you'd like to say about the four panel grid? I mean, it keeps the story, I guess, grounded for one thing. Is there something else you might like to add to that, that comes to mind right now to you?
Well, I think I have my psychotic uh, thoughts about it that I don't know how real they are, but I feel like maybe someone will say I'm crazy, but the gutters between the right and left panels is slightly smaller than the top and bottom
Mm.
panels.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that helps it move
Oh, wow. Yeah.
across. Um, and that if they were all the same distance from each other, it would feel more like isolated moments.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like scene, 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 scene. But I didn't want it to feel like that. I wanted it to feel like one continuous thing. Um, so who the hell knows if that's accurate to the reading experience? But I'm making like um my um diagram or grid or whatever that I'm handing to people, and especially after doing discipline where there was no panel borders. I was like, I have to tell the eye where to go at every single page, you know,
Yeah.
and and after working on that book for years, I feel like I got good at it. Meaning I can get your eye to go to this one spot by having that arm go over there, and a lot of it's just thinking like, okay, what is like, you know how maybe you're supposed to read a comic, but what is your eye actually doing? That's what that that's something that I think about all the time. Like a classic example is you have the right side of a spread has a big splash image, someone's shot or something, a surprising thing, and the left side is a 6 panel grid. Now the reader knows the rules are you start on the left side, but the eye actually will look at the right side spread because it's there, and they're going to see that that character gets shot or whatever the surprise is. So that's what you think. Oh, well, then it doesn't work because what is the eye actually doing? No, the word balloon you're supposed to read is this, but where's the eye actually going? And similarly, so I try to orchestrate where the eye is actually going. And that's of course based on where my eye goes, or where I'm pretty sure people's eyes go based on design rules or directional things in the page. Um, and then similarly, I think, what is someone actually thinking about? Meaning, maybe the comic, a character is saying something about X, but when you're reading it, you think you're actually thinking about Y or Z, some other thing. So, I know that sounds maybe like basic, but it's pretty easy to get tangled up in not thinking about
Yeah.
where the eye actually is and what the reader's actually thinking about.
Well, yes, that's part of the beauty of the comics medium. I just brought discipline now just to show the non-panel approach a little bit. But I'll go back to Blurry. And I find this struggle that Fiona has very very um, well intriguing. If this was an actual person, I would feel so and you do, as you're reading, you do relate with the people. You feel like they're real people. But for her to have such difficulty coming up with a major, it kills me because where's your passion? I'm wondering. Can't you just do what you need to do? And of course, that's what you want the reader to be thinking these thoughts. And then when she comes up with this thing where she's just going to automatic magical thinking or automatic writing, and well, here's your major gabberloo.
Uh, I don't know. Being undecided about something like that does not seem so crazy to me. But the I know. I mean, I know what you mean.
Well, I can't think right now what the phrase was. There's a friend of mine. I would always say this. Untethered or something like that. It wasn't untethered, but I can't think of what it was now. But I knew in general what I wanted to do. But I guess Fiona, maybe she's thinking in terms of, well, I need something to make a living. But I was thinking more in terms of what can I do to sustain myself as a person. So I always want to do something artistic. I wanted to be an artist, and it was always comics. I did a comic strip, and so it was always comics. I knew what I wanted to do. That's why I think for Fiona, come on, what's your passion? And we never really get a resolution on that. I mean, she decides maybe as a therapist, but I don't think her heart's necessarily in that. But here's a fun part where you have her talking to herself, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that goes back to some of the things that you love about manga, where the character is depicted in different ways. Or maybe that's not the perfect example of that, but there's so much to the manga influence, and I think that what my experience has been with a lot of academics is that they don't want to deal with manga. And when they're asked, what do your students like? They'll say, oh, well, manga. And I think, well, what is the problem? Manga is comics. There must be something there. So that's a whole thing in itself.
Yeah, I don't know. That book Discipline, like when I was working on it, I was really, really looking at so much of it came from the research in that book. So it was like actual letters and diary entries from that time from Quakers, and kind of the illustration by, they were called the specials, the Civil War era kind of journalistic illustrators. And so I was doing all of this research and kind of thinking, all right, I'll draw it with this pen on this scale, um, and then I'd show people the finished book, and my friend was like, "This is like shoujo manga, you know."
Mm.
And my friend's right, but it was the I've read comics my whole life, but I think especially in that time when one is most malleable at their teenage years, that happened to coincide with Japanese comics being incredibly exciting in the United States, and it just growing and growing. And those were the comics that I read, and I was really deep into it. I spent my junior year of high school in Japan, and the cartoons I make are obviously kind of uh, in that or maybe not obvious to other people, but are obvious to me. And the um, but they don't, people flipping through them, they don't. I think maybe since comics, you kind of see that. But of course, most people flipping through it, they don't they don't necessarily think it looks like, because it doesn't have the things that are the touchstones for many people of the big eyes and the spiky hair. And
Yeah.
but you and I know that there's more to it than that. Uh, and I kind of felt like um, maybe not. I never felt really. I always, I guess I maybe was surprised that there weren't more things like that. Because like at my local comic shop, the store owner's like Junji Ito is their number one seller, and to me that makes 3,000% sense. Junji Ito is awesome, and those books are really scary, and like the horror comics that I don't want to name, but other horror comics don't deliver the way Junji Ito delivers. So
Mm.
the popularity of manga was never um, a head scratcher for me. I like that. I got that. Oh, of course, there's so many more readers of Junji Ito than there are of other comics because Junji Ito's awesome.
Well, we'll leave it there. Yes.
Little
And
plug for, not that he needs it.
I love this page. You've got Christy trying to figure out, well, she has her struggle. She's trying to figure out her pseudonym, and then she stumbles upon Chris Clue. I just thought that was a lovely page. Now, were two questions. I had the luxury of planning out my interview, and then sometimes I'll scrap my plan. But I want to go back to my initial plan. I was going to announce I have two questions to ask you, Dash, and I think we can create an entire interview from this. But my first question was if you wanted to play around with the idea of bland versus banal, because these characters they're banal, but they're not bland. There's something to all the characters and the environments they're in. It's all very everyday life. We've heard a lot of other commentators, critics, and mention that it's the everyday life that uh, they're all slogging through, trying to figure out what they want. Um, and I mentioned bland and banal because many years ago when I was in college, I interviewed Ann Beattie. I don't know if you've read her,
Yeah.
but I told her, well, your characters, I thought it was interchangeable. I said, they're kind of bland. And she said, no, they're not bland, they're banal. So
Hmm.
that's why I mentioned it. Is
Yeah.
something
Well,
come to
bland
mind?
has connotations of blandness.
Yeah.
Uh, the one person's banal is different than another person's banal, of course, and one person's everyday life is different than another person's everyday life. And there's something a little um, uh, um, what one says is everyday, maybe says more about them than whatever they're diagnosing. What they're maybe just saying is that they relate to it, or that it mirrors, it has something with their everyday. Um, so, for me, I guess that, like I said at the beginning, there was like a zone, almost like an ambient album where like nothing was too high and nothing was too low. Like how, like there's something a little funny about the whole book because it's a little funny that, it's all being sparked by such pointless question, or like, you know, she spends so long choosing between ice creams, and so those things are a little, and some of those things you pointed out, some of the interactions are a little funny, but I don't think it's quite a comedy. Like, there's
No,
not real out and out jokes in it, and at the same time, nothing so dramatic happens, and the stakes are never so high as to be like very, very serious. And you know, not to to me, there was something pleasing about that zone, like an ambient, like a Brian Eno album or something. Like, you're just kind of enjoying being in the world, and and how long could I sustain that tone, you know, and how far could it travel while still being in that tone? And this is what I came up with.
oh, that's wonderful. I want this to be like we just happened to meet at a coffee shop, but there's a beginning to this, a middle, and an end. So I want you to just relax. We're going to start to close things up because there's so much more I could chat about. I watched I hadn't seen him. I just for some reason I didn't get around to it, and then finally I saw my entire high school sinking to the sea and Cryptozoo uh, one night after another, and so man, I could ask him something about that. Or I started to research it. Although it's a wonderful book by um, Uncivilized. What's the publisher's name? Uncivilized Books, right?
Yeah,
And it's a great critical collection. And so I could chat about that too. And well, I will show this, which I correct me if I'm wrong. This is a short story Ford, and I believe this is what triggered or was in the was the kind of the kernel that that led to Blurry.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
thought that
right.
was
And it
interesting.
has the, you know, I think you can see it has the four panels, and it kind of goes into a story, and it has looks, you know, the yeah, I was happy with that, and I'm glad that Uncivilized they reprinted it with that collection, because I still like that story, and um yeah, so it's in that Uncivilized book.
Yeah, so I highly recommend folks to check this out by Greg Hunter. And well, the big other question I wanted to ask you was the tension between being earnest and being ironic. And I can tell from other interviews, from chatting with you, from reading your stuff that uh, there's a sincerity there. And then maybe with the formal issues, that's a way to wake up, but play with the reader a little bit, wake him up or her, and say, well, this is a comic, but then at the same time, the story is sincere. So there's this tension. Is it? Does something come to mind with that earnest versus ironic tension?
That's the story of
It's just,
that's
so
the story of my life.
there we go.
Yeah, you know, I had I think my and I think my dad would be cool with me saying my dad was quite an ironic person. He had a very, very ironic style of delivery. Um, and a lot of the things that I read and liked were quite ironic. Um, and I mean a good kind of irony, you know, like not there's what I mean is I'm not you know, I love my dad, and it was like a um there's a bad irony and a good irony, and sometimes it's hard to know which is which, and sometimes irony is just confusing and just being too cool for school. Um, so the and then being overly sincere is you know, embarrassing for everyone, and emo, and or pretentious, and so, depending on the kind of thing, or there's all these different um uh I don't, you know, one's like dial is each person adjusts their dial. So what is the irony that they can take, and what's the irony that upsets them? Um, but so sometimes, well, for Blurry in particular, the I feel like there's sometimes maybe um, there's a flat affect in the delivery of the drawings that makes one wonder a little how much the author is there. And I sometimes need that kind of drawing because otherwise it's too emo for me, too gooey.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of need a flat affect when you're dealing with really hot material, really like heavy emotional stuff. I think the flat affect helps. Again, that probably from my age and the kinds of things I was into, like again, I'm with my dad, and as the 90, like while I was watching all that anime, there was also I loved Hal Hartley and those kind of movies. Hal Hartley led me to like Godard and all of that kind of French New Wave stuff, which is sort of had a lot of things in it that I liked besides the irony. There was a kind of a collage aspect, particularly to Godard, that I really liked. Anyway, how one, but a lot of comics are too ironic for me, and they feel like they're it's posturing or it's I want there to be some risk of embarrassment. There should be some risk, something at stake. Because if it's too cool for school, I don't care. Get out of town, Especially now in the Trump alt-right time where that irony has almost kind of been weaponized to kind of jokingly say something that one actually means, something hateful. So there's a real danger in irony that that's a great question, and I could answer it forever. I don't know if anything I said spurred something else on, but discipline has a kind of ironic aspect in the definition of irony, meaning like almost like dramatic irony, where you kind of know something that the characters don't know, and you're outside of them. I don't think the characters in discipline, you actually kind of know what they're thinking. They're kind of distant. Cryptozoo's the movies I've made are quite ironic, I think, more ironic than Blurry. So I'm trying to figure it out myself, but it's something that I think about all the time, and I am maybe a recovering ironist, or I don't want to be ironic, but sometimes I need some ironic aspect to have it not be corny to me, or I find it more interesting to be outside of the characters. A really long answer.
No, that was such a great answer. It's a wonderful answer. I love this book. I want everyone to check this book out.
Thanks.
Go out and buy it online, wherever however you wish to do it. Yeah, because I not to bring it back to me, but of course we're only human. We always bring it back to ourselves. But yeah, the idea of being sarcastic, it's a defense mechanism, and sometimes you want people to read your mind. You're being sarcastic, but there's with a heart. If you're being jokey with a heart, and sometimes maybe just don't be sarcastic. So you have to mix it up. But anyway, getting back to your book.
Especially when you have a little kid and you're talking to your little kid, you don't
Oh, right.
she's not my 7-year-old daughter can kind of tell when I'm joking, but I'm trying not to fill her head with falsehoods just because I'm making some joke that
Well,
there's a little extra earnestness.
I'm at my best when I'm with my daughter, and well, now she's made me much older. I now have grandkids, so I'm most human when I'm with them. I'm at my best, and so Jennifer will say, "Why can't you be like that more with me?" I'm joking. I'm joking. We're doing really well, but I don't
You know,
want
I'll say one thing that I think that is kind of funny is, I said my dad's very ironic, and I remember when I went to college, he would send me emails, and my dad's a copywriter. He writes kind of like direct mail copy, and his emails were 3,000% sincere. And I said to him, like, Dad, you send me, they don't sound like you. Your emails sound like completely different. And my dad was perplexed. He was like, that's me. Yeah, he had a completely earnest tone, especially on, as you know, from emails. Now you're gonna be misinterpreted in your email, so you kind of have an extra earnestness in all internet communication, as we've unfortunately figured that out. Although sometimes I'll still, of course, people try to that it yeah, I don't, I'll just stop there.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dash. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for this.